last session? What we have discussed on last sessions? Vinita, tell me.
Yeah, after finishing installations part, sir, in last lecture, we have already discussed with the related to the JRE and JVM. So how that means how the data is will be stored into the different types of a memory. It's related to the heap memory and the stack memory. After that, with the help of a notepad, how we can design a code and how we can run the code with the help of the command prompt. So
Okay.
after later on this one, we also we have seen the different types of ideas. It's one of them. Eclipse is one of them. So with the help of Eclipse, how to create a package or how to create a class and how to write how to design an application and how to run. So
Okay.
basically,
So what is the difference between JDK and JRE?
JDK means whenever we design any Java application, so we need the JDK. That means we have to install the JDK application to design any Java any Java code, and JRE it's a runtime environment. That means after designing a Java application, so we have to run that code. So with the help of a Java runtime execution, we have to run the code with the JRE.
Okay. Basically, JDK stands for Java Development Kit, which introduced the API, which introduced the documentation, which introduced the compiler, which introduced some other tools. But JRE is what? Is a Java runtime environment. JRE is Java runtime environment. So it is used to provide the runtime. It provides the specification of runtime to execute the bytecode on the machines.
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
Now let me share my screen and then from there we'll start. Okay, just give me a moment. Today we'll discuss about object-oriented programming. So what is the OOPS principle? Vinita, what is the OOPS principle? What are the OOPS
Yes, sir.
principles?
OOPS. Yeah, OOPS is related to the object-oriented programming. So whenever we design any application, so the application contains the data, methods, and the functions. But after designing those parts, so later on we have to how to access those functions with the creating of the objects. So at that time we need to create objects, and through that objects we have to access the methods and the functions. So it's yeah.
Okay. Object-oriented programming system. It is a programming techniques that we use to designing our applications by using object-oriented principles. So it is a programming paradigm based on the concept of object. That's why we called Java is an object-oriented programming languages, because every time that you design the application, you perform all the actions, all the tasks with the help of object only. Because every object that contains all the data and as well as it contains the method, that is the functionality which you have implemented and you need to perform during the runtime. The primary purpose of the object-oriented programming is to basically increase the flexibility and maintain of the code of the program. And object-oriented programming brings together data and its a behavior, which is called a method, in a single location. We call the object. So object represents the data. Object represents its behavior. It makes easier to understand when you will go through the different OOPS principles, such as class, object, such as encapsulation, why you use encapsulation, We will see the polymorphism, how basically we do implement method overloading and method overriding. And then we'll see basically the inheritance. There we talk about the code reusability, and then we'll see go through the abstract class and interfaces. Okay, so all the stuff that we'll see one by one. OOPS concept. So these are the main pillar of the OOPS concept: object and class. Object and class is the main pillar of your Java object-oriented programming. And then we'll see the constructor and object-oriented programming feature, like as I said, encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, abstractions, abstract class, interface, and methods. So let's try to understand one by one. Let's start with the first object. What exactly an object? Object is basically instance of the class. Okay, it is an instance of the class, means we create a copy from the class called as an instance. So object store the data and provide some method, some functionality for accessing and modify these data. Objects, again I'm telling you, object play a very important role in Java, because through object only we can initialize some values, some information, the data, and by using the same object we can do perform some task. Okay, so we can create an object from the class. If there is a class, then we can think about object. When there is no classes, we cannot create our instance, means we cannot create a of the your object. So here I've taken example that is a vehicle classes, and every vehicle classes will have a some such as vehicle ID, vehicle name, vehicle prices, right, vehicle brand. So this is something kind of a blueprint of every object, right? But the actual object you can see when you create a instance from the class. So the actual bus, auto, jeep, so these all are what a different instance that I have created from the vehicle classes. These are the different instance I have created from this vehicle class. So vehicle is something, it is a logical entity where we declare the properties, where we write the method, where we design the constructor, where we write some other instance as per our business requirement. As per your need, you design the application. We write everything inside the class. It is just a logical entity we call as a blueprint. But the actual object we create from the vehicle classes, which we can see in the real world entity, such as actual bus. Yes, I can see in the real world, that is called an instance or object. Actual auto. So these all are what the real-time entity, not a logically. Class is a logical entity, but object is a real world entity. Data, properties, and fields, something which represent the information, which represent the attributes of the object. Like as I said before, every vehicle will have a vehicle ID, every vehicle have a names, every vehicle have a prices. So these all are what? Some properties, some data about the vehicle which represent. And next one is the methods. So method is something, a functionality, right? So these are the some function that manipulate the data. Okay, so each data that will be exposed, each information will be exposed by your method. But where you initialize the data, that is the object, right? So from one class we can have a many number of objects. Those objects can share the same common properties and same common method. Means I can take an example of a student. So I have a student class, or maybe I can take a example of employee class. So every employee will have a employee ID, name, designation, salary, department. Yes, every employee will have some action. That means they do have some responsibility. They do need to complete some task. They do have such login and logout timing. They do have some schedule that they need to attend. So these all are what? Some tasks, some action, some task that is applicable for different employee, right? So we have a entity called class, that is called employee, and from that employee we can create many number of employee those who are working in a different department. So every employee will have the same common properties and same common action. That is a method. Here, if I have a class called student, then how you will go for to create an object for the student class? Student one is nothing but an object that I have created. We call it as an instance equal to new student. So new is basically a keyword which create a new memory to store this object along with its values. I mean the object values. Okay, so student, the last one is basically a constructor. We will discuss in details what exactly this constructor. As of now, you just keep in your mind that constructor is basically helps to initialize the data, which provides some new informations to the newly created object from the class. Now we understood about the object, we understood about the object properties, we understood about how to create object, and we understood how we can have such methods for that object. Now, as I said, without classes there will be no object, right? So before we talk about any object, it's very important to understand about the class. So let's try to understand in details what exactly this class. A class is a template or a blueprint that is used to create an object. A class is a template or blueprint that is used to create an object. Just give me one moment. Okay. Class representation of object of and the set of operation that can be applied to such object. Class representation of the action of every object that they need to perform. Class consists of data members and method. Obviously, whenever you will just go for to create a class, and every class will have some properties and as well as some methods. Okay, some action that will be right. I mean, some functionality that will be right, and along with some properties as per our business need. Okay, primary purpose of the class is to have some information, some data. This is achieved with attributes, which is also known as data members. Yes. So whenever we go for to declare some properties and some methods, right? So that is going to be accessed, it's going to be initialized to any object, and then we will expose those data through the method. If you look into one example here, I'm getting some background noise. I think someone is unmute, so make it mute. So we have a loan account class, and here you can see some common properties: type of loan, account holder name, date released, loan amount. So these are some properties, and there is a method, renew method and extend method, right? So from this loan account class, I can have a many different types of object, okay, such as personal loan, housing loan, educational loan, different types of loan account that I created. So do you think that every types of loan will have a type, account holder name, loan amount, date released? Yes. And every loan can be renew action? Yes. So class is something which is a blueprint, which can have some properties and method which is applicable for all the object that you create from the same class. A class in Java contains some fields, some constructor, some static block, and as well as methods, and as well as some instance. What do you mean by the fields? Field is nothing but some properties. What do you mean by the constructor? Like as you discussed before, constructor is what? Constructor is what is basically initialize the object.
Initialize.
Yes. Constructor is used to initialize object. Static block. What is the use of static block? What is the use of static block? Static block is basically to initialize the static variables and it will execute some task before it call the main method. Whenever we run the program, okay, so before the class loading the main method, that is a publish static void main, it will execute a static block. If someone will ask you in interview that, okay, what is the use of static block? Why you write static block? Static block is basically belongs to class level. It is used to initialize static variables and we can execute some task in the class level before it execute the main method. And what about the methods? Methods are many different types of method we can write. We can have a method with return type, method without return type as per our requirement. Method can have some parameter without parameter as well, right? So it depends what the way how you want to represent, the way how use your requirement. Based on that, you need to write it. You need to introduce a many different method which will do some task, some action which is going to be done by the method. What about the instance? Instance is nothing but object for another class. So let's say I have two classes. One is student classes and another one is student courses. Okay, student courses and student classes. So if any student they want to know about the courses ID, course fees, or any functionality from the courses student courses classes. So what I need to do, I need to create an object for that courses classes inside the student class, right? That means the student is dependent of the courses class to get some information or some calling method, right? So I need to create an instance of those courses inside the student class to call the courses class properties and method, and something that we called in object oriented languages tight coupling. This is an example of a class. My first Java example is a class, okay, and there are two variables. I have declared integer a and integer b, and then I have some method. I have to declare add and subtract method. What exactly the add has to do, which has to write the logic inside the add method, and as you can see, its return type is an integer. Same, I have another method with the same integer return type, which is called subtract method, right? So what basically they do, the logic which we need to write inside this method. Syntax to declare class, as you already discussed in the last sessions, right? We have to write a class and class name, and inside the class we'll write some properties and as well as some method and some constructor along with instance and static block as well, right? So every class will have its own identifier, and that is represent everything which you are going to declare inside your block. This is how something is look like. Another example you can see here. I have a class called vehicle, and inside the class I have some certain properties. As you can see, instance variables called doors, speed, and color, right? So every vehicle will have a number of doors, every vehicle will have some speed limit, and every vehicle will have some colors, right? So inside my class body I have declared some properties, and then I have some instance method, that is the run method. So what exactly the meaning of instance? So instance is nothing but object. That means those methods and variable that I have declared inside the class are basically object class, object level variables and object methods. Okay, that means those variables can be accessed only through the object, and the method also can be called only through the object. That's why we call Java is an object oriented programming languages. So to design such object oriented applications, we need to understanding the object oriented principle. We'll talk about later, but before that we need to understanding the most important here is types of variables. Okay, what are the types of variables that we declare inside our class? Basically we declare three different types of variables. One is the local variables, instance variables, and as well as static variables. So local variable is some things that we declare inside the method, and instance variable something you declare outside of the methods inside the class, and static variable something that you declare a static keyword. All right, so let's try to understand here. Local variables defined inside the method, constructor, or block are called as local variables. Any variable that you declare inside your method or inside your constructor, we call as a local variables, or anything that you declare inside the block. Like as I said before, static block we create. So inside the static block, if you write anything, if anything that you write inside your main method, that is also called as a local variables. The variables will declare and initialize within the method, and the variables will be destroyed when the method has completed the task. That means the scope of the variable is very less, right? Once the method is going to complete the task, the variable is going to be destroyed. What about the instance variables? The instance variables are variables within a class but outside any method. Instance variables are variable within a class but outside any method. Outside any method, these variables are initialized when the class is instantiated. That means what? Whenever you create an object, then also you can initialize those variables. Without object, we cannot do. Instance variables can be accessed from inside any method, constructor, or blocks of that particular class. Anywhere we can use those variables, either your methods, either your main methods through object, either any block that we can use it. Means anywhere throughout the program we can use the instance variables, but local variables only within the block. This is something, a small example that you can see here. Before that, just look into the class variables. A class variables are variables declared within a class outside any method with static keyword. We cannot declare local variables as static variables because static variables are class variables. Static variables are class variables. Whenever we are going to run the program, so what will happen first? The class has to be loaded. After the class is going to loading, it will load its properties and method. Okay, so class properties are class variables along with the class method, that is your static method. Okay, just keep in your mind always, all the static variables and static methods are class variables and class methods. Now look into this example here, class A. I have declared some instance variables along with some static variable as well. And inside the method, I have declared local variables and I have initialized n is equal to 90, right? That is your local variables. So static variables m is not required any instance to initialize it. You can simply call m variables through the class name because as it is a class variables. But data is equal to 50, which is a instance variables. Compulsory, we need to create an object for the A class to call, I mean to initialize the data, or you want to call the data variables, anything. So you need to create an object first. But for m variables, it's not required because as it is a class variables. So you can simply call class dot variable name a dot m, that you can call it. It's not important. Next one is the constructor. Next one is a constructor. Constructor is what? Constructor in Java is a special type of method that we use to initialize the object. Constructor in Java is a special type of method which you use to initialize the object. If I want to creating an object, and that object will be initialize the value by the constructor. Java constructor is invoked at the time of object creation. That's interesting things. Okay, whenever we are whenever you are creating an object, that time this constructor are going to be invoked. It constructs the value, that means provide the data for the object. That's why it's known as a constructor. Its main responsible is what? Initialize the information, initialize the data to the newly created object. We call as a constructor, right? So we do use constructor and we do use methods. So what is the difference between method and constructor? Let's talk about later. You need to follow certain rules while creating a constructor in Java. So here are the basically two rules that you need to follow. Constructor name must be the same name as the class name. Constructor must have no explicit return type. Constructor name must be same as name as the class name. Whatever the constructor you create, the constructor name should be the same name of the class name. Why? Because constructor is special method of a class, and constructor must have no explicit return type. Constructor must have no explicit return type. There will be no return type. You will have return type for method, but no return type for a constructor. Types of Java constructor. There are two types of constructor we write: default constructor and as well as parameterized constructor. Same we write in for method also, default method and as well as parameterized method. Same we have in constructor as well. We have a default constructor and as well as a parameterized constructor also. So default constructor will assign the default values, and parameterized constructor will pass whatever the value that we pass as a parameter here. So let me just go through and show you that how it works. We created some project last time. What is the project name, Vinita? What is the project name we created last time?
Sorry, I forgot. It's
Java demo project we created. You forget. Okay. This is the class we discussed. Hello program class we discussed, and this is a project we created that is called a Java demo project we created. Am I right or wrong? Now,
yeah, it's right.
Let me create a new class here. I told you on Friday and today is Monday, but you forget. Okay, no problem. Let's go for create a new class. And that class I want to add in a different packages that is called constructor. What's the class name here? Say employee class. In a main method, obviously. Yes. So in my employee class is created inside the constructor packages, and soon it's going to open. Yes. Now what I can do here, I can just introduce some properties and some constructor and some methods. So let's say ID, these all are what? Instance variables. I can have a here, I can have a salary also. I can have a role also. Right. What I can do here, I can just introduce a constructor here. So let me just make it full screen. Yeah. So as I said, constructor name should be the same name of the class. Employee. Right. This is what? Default constructor. Now I will do parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor. What I need to do? I need to pass some parameter here. Employee ID. Right? This is what a two parameterized constructor. And I can have another constructor with a three parameterized integer, ID, name, and what a three parameterized constructor. whatever I have declared here, what we call, this is what? Instance variable. Instance variables. And whatever we declare here, like as a parameter, what do you call? This is a local variable, right? Now, what I need to do, I need to refer my local variables to my instance variables. I need to refer whatever I will pass the parameter here while calling this constructor. While I'm going to invoke this constructor, whatever the parameter I will pass, so those values has to refer to my current object properties. So what I need to do, I need to use this keyword to refer my current class object. So I will say this dot id equal to employee ID. Then one is dot name equal to name. Same like here. This dot ID equal to ID. Then this dot equal to name. Dot salary equal to salary. Right now, what I need to do, I have to create a method which can expose the data. I have a variables. I have created a constructor which can initialize to my newly created object, but I need to expose the data, right? So what I will do, I will create a method public. It doesn't have any return type. Okay, void say right. What I need to do, I need to print employee data. That is the ID. Just going to use the concatenation operator to print in the same line. So first I will print employee ID. Okay, that means whenever I will call this method, which will expose every employee information. First it will print employee ID, then employee name. After that, to print the salary. Okay. What I will do, I will just create an object for the employee. Okay. One for new employee, right? So I'm not passing any parameter. That means what? It will call default constructor. Default constructor. Okay. And if I will say obj1 dot employee, then it exposes default value, no doubt. Right. Now, what I will do here, I will just create another object. And what is the default value? Let's go and see. Zeros and nulls. Zeros and nulls. This is the default values. Okay. Now, what I will do here, I will create another object here, say employee object2 equal to employee, and I want to initialize employee ID 1 and employee name that is something called right. Maybe it's obj2 dot show employee, right? It will expose the value that I have initialized. Now it is another object and obj3 equal to new employee, and then I will say employee ID equal to 2, employee name is equal to, let's say, Simon, employee salary is a $6,000, right? Now we'll say obj3 dot show employee. Okay, so how many objects I have created? 3 objects I have created. First object doesn't have any value because constructor does not initialize anything. Second object will have ID and name because that has been initialized by this constructor. And third object will have all 3 values. Now let's go and check what exactly is going to show us here. It says that first object is null as we already printed before. Second object, it says that have a ID, name, but no salary. The third object, it says that ID, name, and salary, right? Now, if I will say here that I just want to copy this data. I just wanted to copy this data to this object. I just want to copy those object data to my empty object. So what we can do, we can simply do by using copy constructor, and that I'm going to discuss now. Right? We discussed default constructor, parameter constructor. Even we can have a copy constructor also. Something I'm telling out of that materials. Okay. From extra knowledge. Okay. I'm going to create another constructor here. Have a reference of employee. Okay. Employee reference, and that reference will take any object data to the newly created object. So we'll say this dot ID ID equals to reference will take ID. Okay, and then this dot employee name equal to reference will take that name from any object, existing object, and then this dot equal to reference. Right now, what I will do here will say that obj yeah, so I will pass obj2 as a reference. That means what we'll do here, make this in a comment line because we create object always a unique name, right? So let's put this in a right. So now what will happen here, that will not it will not call the default constructor, it will call the parameterized constructor. It will call the copy constructor, not parameterized. It will call the copy constructor here, right? So it will copy the data from one of the object which we have already in the heap memory. It will take those data, well, and slice to this obj1. Before obj1 is greater than null, but now it says that some value that is going to be copied from here. Now let's run and see that how it works. We got the same data 2 times. This is copied from my object. Okay, if I will say here obj3, then that's what happened here. obj3 here. Oh, obj3 is ladder, right? So what I can do? So both object 1 and object 3 will have the same value. So whatever the object I will pass as a reference to that constructor, it will simply take the reference of that particular values of the instance and will be assigning to the obj1. Right now, if I will say, okay, I want to print that object, so what will happen here? I will not call this employee. I want to simply print this object. Now I'll print this object here. So this I will say my object values. So, and here I will say my object 1 values. What I can see here, if I'll print this object, what I can see here. Can you guess? Tell me what I can see here when I print this object. Just guess and tell me what I can see here when I'm printing this two object 3 and object 1. What I can see here. No answer.
Both object 1 and 2 results.
Sir, in the first object, it prints as it is the employee 1 and the name. Then when second object is going to be run, so it's a 2 Simon and the salary prints. And in the third one, it's the same as it is copied to the object 2.
Are you sure?
I'm not pretty sure.
Are you sure?
Not that much pretty sure, but once that means I have to try for that one.
Have you tried this to print the object? It is printing the reference where this object has stored. If you talk about the previous program, what we discussed, stack memory and heap memory. Stack memory will store the reference of each object that we create, but heap memory we store the values. Whatever we got the data from the last time, that it comes from this heap memory, the values, the instance values of each instance. But here, when I'm printing that object directly, then it will print the reference where this object is stored in the stack. So this is the reference. That means that object 3 is stored in this reference. Object 1 is stored this reference area. But as a developer, I need the object value. I don't want to see the reference here. I don't want to see where this object is stored. That is not my requirement. I don't want to see that. I want to see that data. So how we can do this? You need to represent your object class method. You need to represent your object class method, and that object class method will represent each object. Okay, so I'm going to override one of the object class method. Just right click in the class, go to source, toString method. ToString method, it is object class method which will represent each properties of object. Okay, see the Eclipse, it is going to reduce my task. Instead of I write this code, I can simply use these steps. Okay, so this is one of the object class method This is one of the object class method called toString method, and its return type is a string array. Okay, so it represent every employee data. It print employee ID, it print employee name, it print salary, and it print the role. If you don't have a role, it printed default values, that is a null, no doubts, right? Now let me save this code because the code is not saved, right? You can see the star mark. Okay, let's go and save. Now run the code again. Let's see. Will I see the same reference, or will I see the object value, the properties, whatever I'm going to expecting? Oh no, I'm not getting the reference. I'm getting the object properties here. I can see the employee ID. Oh, this is the name, this is something salary, and there is no role has assigned, so it's printing the null values. And same for here as well, right? So if you say this is the object class method, how can I know? No problem, I can show you here whether object class method or not. If this is the object, if this method is not there in the object class, then how I can override from my super classes? If this method is not there in my super class, that is my object class. Remember, this is very important questions. Which class is a super class of all the Java class that we create in Java? It is an object class. Object is a super class. Object is super class of all the Java class that we create on your Java program, right? And there are many methods of object class. Let me show you one by one here. obj1, sorry, obj1 dot. Here I can show you some instance method, whatever I have already written. Okay, that is called what? So employee. Along with, I can show you some object class method which is already introduced by Java. We can see here clone method. We can see object methods which you use for comparison, like as you discussed. Okay, here you can see the description also how it works. We have a finalize method also, that is object class method. We have a get class method also. We have a hash code method, notify method, notify all, show employee, toString. Just before I have a user, the toString methods here you can see that is my object class methods. Already I have a used toString methods here. Hope you got a clear understanding about the constructor. Hope you got a clear understanding about the parameterized constructor, default constructor, and as well as the copy constructor and some object class methods. For your reference, there are few more examples that you can do practice. Okay, here I have given in this materials. This is what I told you before. What is the difference between method and constructor? Because method also used to initialize the values. Constructor also used to initialize the method, to initialize the values. See, I can write a method also here. So let me show you. If I can write some method, say add employee. This method will help me to adding the employee. Okay, what exactly will do? It will take some parameter, whatever I want to add into every employee object. I can take integer employee ID, comma, load salary. Okay, I just want to add only employee ID and employee salaries to each employee object. So again, I have to use a reference keyword that is called this keyword. Yes or not? So this dot employee ID equal to employee ID, and this dot salary equal to salary. Okay, now I can use this method also here. I can say employee obj4 equal to employee, and obj4 dot add employee, and I need to pass the parameter here. Before I pass the parameter, before I pass the parameter while creating the object, but here explicitly I have to call this method. Explicitly I have to call this method. One extra lines I have to write here. One extra lines I have to write here. Okay, my employee ID is 4 here. My employee ID is 4 here, and the employee salary is something, let's say $4,000. Okay, then I can write again extra lines to expose the data. So I will say object for data employee. Right. Now let me run this code. Okay, now you can see I got this time. That means I can do the same job. I can do the same job what the constructor is doing, but there is some extra task you have to do. That's what I'm going to show you. Constructor is used to initialize the state of object, but method is used to expose the behavior of object. That means what? Method is not used. Method is not designed to initialize. It is used to expose the behavior of an object. Why I have used the show employee method? Because I need a method to expose every employee object, every employee properties. Constructor must not have return type, but method must have return type. I'll show you practically here. There is no return type. If you look into, I have created not one or two, 4 constructor I have created. None of the constructor will have any. None of the constructor will have any return type. But look into this method. I have a some even there is no return type. Also, I have to write void. Constructor is invoked implicitly. Automatically, it will invoke whenever I create an object. But method compulsory, you have to call it. That's what I did here. I have called this constructor explicitly. Sorry, method. I have called this method explicitly, but here, while creating the object itself, that constructor is going to invoking. This constructor is going to invoking. This constructor is going to invoking. I no need to write some extra line, but here I need to write some extra lines of code. Java compiler provides a default constructor if you don't have any constructor. Yes, that's true. But method not provided. Constructor name must be the same name the class name. That is how you can identify whether it is a constructor or method. Many of them will get confused whether it is a constructor or method, but you should see if it is the same name the class name, then it is a constructor, but method not a mandatory. Method is not a mandatory. Okay, so I will share this material. Just go through it, do some practice. Okay, and from tomorrow we'll continue the next topics. Tomorrow we'll continue the next topics about the static blocks, static variables, static methods, and we'll see some other part of like OOPS principles such as encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, all the stuff that we discussed. Any question for me? Are you able to understand, or you want me to go slow, or what is your opinion? Yes, tell me.
I followed through quite well, but the constructor parts, like the objects, the copy constructor, I didn't understand fully. However, maybe I wanted to ask you, are you going to share your notes? I wasn't in the Friday
Yes.
class, so today's my first day.
Yes. I'm going to sharing you these materials.
Okay, are you going to give us exercises on the constructor today?
No, I will say just go through the materials and the videos. Tomorrow I will give you a assignment work on it.
Okay.
Any other question?
Hi.
Priyanka, tell me, how are you?
Yeah, good.
How can
How
I
are
help
you? Actually, this is my first class.
Yes, I know. Any question for
So
me?
actually, I didn't understand how many classes did you done before?
1 or 2 sessions.
Okay, then how can I get that materials and videos? Like,
I can send you today. You can go through it. The previous materials, no issues.
okay,
Still, if you have any
okay, thank
questions, please come back. I'm here to help you.
you. Okay, sure. Thank you.
Welcome. Any other questions from anyone? Shaiman, Haptit. Any other questions? Okay, all right. See you from tomorrow. Bye. Take care.